If you can choose when to win a lottery, keep it for when you will run out of gas while diving. And if you cannot choose when to be so lucky, then make sure to always have enough gas to safely return to the surface. Because relying on the showering gas skill to handle such a complex situation is on one hand encouraging due to the many available options we have, but on the other hand, discouraging as we must select the right one among so many possibilities, considering also that you may not pull out the winning ticket on the first try, and that in most of these scenarios, your buddy will have 50% of the responsibility in this fast decision, taken under such stressful conditions. This and the next video are necessary to get an overview of all the options available. While in the last video, the third, we will come to some useful conclusions.
In this Wikipedia page, titled Scuba Diving Fatalities, we can read that the most frequent known root cause for diving fatalities is running out of or low on breathing gas. In scuba diving, the run out of gas scenario is probably the most changed over the years. Starting from what has been rightly overcome because of dangers, such as cylinders with a lever to open the gas reserve, to what could be applied even in modern days, like the buddy breathing method, that is, sharing gas through a single regulator. This technique has since been suppressed because it was deemed too difficult for poorly trained recreational divers. However, we still see it being dug up by the more trained tech ones. Let's explore these options to see why sharing gas can be a lottery, and more importantly, if it is possible to predict which is the lucky ticket to buy.
First of all, as we just mentioned, the buddy breathing option, which means two divers breathing alternatively from the same regulator, is not an option anymore. We may have practiced it in case we have been certified for some time, many years, as well as we may have also seen it in some movies. But due to the high levels of knowledge and practice required to safely perform it, it has been eliminated for a long time now. In many courses, it was an optional exercise, resulting in some divers practicing it, while the majority did not. When average divers have tried to solve an out-of-gas scenario with this option, it often ended with not one, but two divers in trouble.
The addition of a second regulator led to the current standard configuration, which means two regulators, both on the right side of the diver, and a pressure gauge plus the low-pressure hose to inflate the BCD, both on the left side of the diver. All this is connected to a first stage, sometimes two different ones. This standard configuration allows divers to share gas more safely, without the need to exchange a single source of gas. Having said that, and before we start the journey into the imperfect recreational world of the sharing gas skill, let us try to clear our minds.
With the term main regulator, we refer to the regulator being used during a dive, the one already in his or her mouth when a gas emergency occurs. While the other is the alternative gas source, sometimes also called the emergency or spare regulator. Gas can be shared through the donor's main regulator or through the alternative source, just as the new source can be offered by the donor or grabbed by the receiver, depending on who leads the sharing procedure. This means that a hypothetical student could face 8 different scenarios. 4 in which she acts as a donor, 2 in which she leads the procedure, offering one of his regulators, and theoretically 2 more in which his partner leads the sharing procedure, grabbing the new gas source. Plus 4 more scenarios, this time acting as a receiver. As before, 2 scenarios in which his buddy leads the sharing procedure, offering the new source of gas. And 2 more theoretical scenarios in which he leads the procedure, grabbing the alternative source of gas. Still to clear our minds, this picture should help us to avoid misunderstandings with these 3 terms. The hose, or regular hose, sometimes called also the short hose, the longer hose compared to the short, and the long hose, which is the longest of the three. And usually, in a standard configuration, the short hose is used for the main source of gas, and the longer hose for the alternative one, while the long is not part of the standard configuration. In our discussion, it is not the length of the hose that makes a regulator the main or the alternative one, it is how we use it.
We just completed a fast introduction to this topic, and even having listed only the basic available options, and not even all the diving gear available, it should be clear why we use the term lottery. To help you to navigate it, you will find in the description of the last video of this series a link to download a summary. Now, let's take a deep breath, whatever the source, and let's start to explore them.
The most common debate is about which regulator of our body we should breathe from in case we are out of our own gas. Either we should use the main one, the one the donor is actually using, or we should use the alternative gas source, hanging somewhere on the donor's BCT. The following two videos show these two options, both performed using the same standard configuration. All options may have potential advantages, as well as potential disadvantages that often are more subjective than objective, able to rise to a never-ending discussion. But please remember, this is not a discussion about diving agencies and which ones are better than others, and not even about the divers who play these simulations. We have to focus on the sharing gas procedure, in this case on which regulator is shared, and the consequences of this choice. In both videos is the donor that offer her regulator, and the now linked divers rise together to the surface. In this first video, the donor offers her main regulator, while in this second video, the donor offers her alternative source of gas.
After having had a look at these videos, some questions that might arise could be: why do divers need the longer hose? If not for this scenario, what else is the longer hose used for? Does the longer hose allow more freedom to turn our head and to swim closer to our body? And please, note that these short hoses used by the donor divers in these videos are not the shorter ones we may encounter. Having said that, why is the option to share gas through the shorter regulator hose so popular among both divers, donors, and receivers?
Probably, the problem is not the short hose. Probably it is just in the wrong place at wrong time, because it is simply connected to the main regulator. For many years in the past, and even nowadays, divers have been taught that this is a reassuring option for the more stressed diver out of gas, which she could think, okay, she is giving me her best regulator, the one from which she is breathing. For sure it will work, I am saved. This idea is probably strictly related to another old-fashioned concept, which nowadays should no longer be acceptable. The idea is that we do not need to buy an alternative gas source, as good and expensive as the main one, because we will never use it. This concept was wrong at that time, and is still wrong in the modern days, and the truth is that modern regulators are close to perfection, and we can trust them, even those that are not at the top of the price range. Accidents due to bad manufacturing are extremely rare, if any, and obviously, bad manufacturing is not the same as bad maintenance. Even more, where is the logic of saving one diver, offering the best regulator, and at the same time, putting ourselves in trouble switching to a poor alternative gas source? Both regulators must be of good quality. Nowadays, this should be the norm in recreational diving, and it really is, because all the regulators available in major markets must meet the minimum quality standards.
But then, if the donor's regulators are both the same quality, which one should be used? Logic says that we should opt for the regulator who generates less stress for both divers, and logic says also that probably the receiver would be under more stress than the donor. From the donor's perspective, it is quite logical to assume that the less stressful option is to keep the main regulator and let the receiver to breathe from the alternative gas source. While from the receiver's perspective, two different phases can be identified. As we have seen, after the regulator has been exchanged and he can finally breathe normally again, the less stressful option would be to breathe through the regulator with the longer hose, which allows more freedom of movement and swim, because now we know that they are both of good quality. But before this phase, the regulator must be exchanged. And in this first phase, which is the less stressful option for the receiver, it's difficult to give the unique definitive answer, and while probably we are not able to choose the best solution, we could at least identify the less optimal. Therefore, if the receiver is still calm enough, it should be easy and logical to share gas through the alternative gas source of the donor. While, if the diver who is out of gas is already stressed, which donor's regulator should be used? Probably still the alternative source, leaving at least one diver 100% in control of the situation and able to offer the best possible assistance. What do you think in such a situation, where the receiver refuses the alternative gas source because it's not coming straight from the donor's mouth? He maybe won't even notice where this regulator came from. So, the least optimal option is to share gas through the donor's main regulator, forcing her to switch to the alternative one, and at the same time, sharing gas through the shorter hose, limiting freedom of both divers. In addition, share gas through the donor's main regulator will not offer any objective advantage, do we have stated that both regulators meet the minimum quality standards.
So, what could make the difference in this case? Reality often reminds us that things don't always work out as in theory, and in this case, the difference can be made by how prompt and fast the donor will act, offering the alternative gas source before the receiver is tempted to grab one himself, potentially grabbing even the main one from the donor's mouth. Please note that we are not saying that this is how it should work. We are saying that it happens. Of course, a sharing gas scenario is not a speed competition, and speed without knowledge can lead to a disaster. So, a new question might arise. Is the donor physically offering one of her regulators, or does the receiver have to take it himself? Who has to manage the alternative source of gas? We will answer these and many more questions in the next videos of this series, and thank you for watching.
Please find in the description of this video the link to the next one. Remember that by clicking on the bell and by subscribing, you'll be informed about new videos, while by sharing and giving a like to this video, you'll help to spread greater awareness among divers.